Hello and welcome to our complimentary webinar, which is brought to you today in partnership with Genesis, AusContact's national silver sponsor, and it's entitled Stories from the Front Line, Facing Unforeseen Challenges in the Contact Centre. This highly interactive webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of today's panel of industry luminaries who will share their recent experiences, we hope that you will have some great takeaways and for your respective operations, and that you will be leaning into the conversation. There will be a Q&A at the end of the formalities. I'm Fiona Keogh and I'm CEO of AusContact and your moderator for today. While we're waiting for everyone to join us, let's use the time to quickly run through some housekeeping with you. Remember to ask your burning questions as we go along to maximise the benefit, and we'll also be providing you with the recording of the webinar. To interact with us, please use the Q&A tab on the control panel. Please use this to ask questions and or make comments for our panel or myself from time to time. Don't forget, we're going to have a full Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So please type your questions as you go along so you don't forget to ask them. I know that many of you are familiar with asking questions, but let's try out the Q&A tab on the control panel now, just in case you haven't used it before. And the question for today is, if you could find a positive about coronavirus, how would you describe it in one word? So I'm going to kick off and say the one thing that I've found really good about coronavirus is family. I have adult children that I don't normally see very much, and one of them lives with me currently, and we literally have breakfast together every single day. With him going to work and me going to work in the past, we would pass like ships in the night, and so I've actually got to learn a lot more about my gorgeous boy. Maybe some things I don't want to know about my gorgeous boy, but it's really good. So let's see what everyone's telling us. We've got people resetting, we've got people relaxing. Time, yes, isn't time so good? That dreadful commute to and from work, yeah, that's really great. Yeah, time seems to be very, very popular as a response. So it's very clear our audience today actually know how to use the Q&A tab on the control pane. So that means we should be able to get lots of questions, so don't forget. So just a little bit more housekeeping. If you're listening through headphones or speakers and you experience any issues with your internet connection, please note that on the control panel, you can click on the raised hand and the AusContact team will rush to your aid, or to switch to the telephone, go back to the original email link, and that has the phone number and access codes, etc. for the webinar. So with that, I'm really pleased to offer a warm welcome to Jessica Ricks, who's the Head of Customer Interactions Contact Centre Sunsuper, Natalie Lane, Head of Contact Centre Greater Bank, Hayley Gray, Manager of Customer Services Deakin University, and Facilitator Extraordinaire, Sophie Geeson, Head of Consulting ANZ at Genesis. She's an industry legend and a proud Queenslander. Over to you, Sophie.
Thank you. Yes, go Queensland is what I say every time, especially when it's state of origin time. I think we might have some differences this year, but I'm looking forward to what we end up having. Look, thanks everyone for coming along, and thanks to the panelists that we have today. The reason we wanted to get up with AusContact today and speak to some of the managers and business owners out in our industry today was really about the fact that we've spoken extensively over the last couple of months to each other through our informal and formal network. Probably the most common, thing that has come out of this is that there are some really clear similarities in the way that organisations have had to pivot and manage how their organisation responds to the pandemic impacts. Also some really interesting differences between, you know, how different organisations have enacted those policies and what they have seen as a surprise, either positive or negative. And I know for myself, hearing both of those types of stories, what's worked and what hasn't, really helped me to start to build a better idea of, you know, what's possible in my organisation, but also how to help others. So we sort of thought, you know, AusContact and Genesis thought this would be a great opportunity to just have a really informal chat with some of these business leaders and say, please tell us what you've done, what you're doing, and where do you go from here? So you don't want to keep hearing from me. I'm going to start to ask questions so you can hear from the people you've logged in to hear from. So I've got a few questions, but I might kick off, Hayley, with you, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and where you're from, and maybe start, you know, by telling us what were the key changes that you had to enact in your business when everything sort of started becoming that flurry of activity?
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, I'm from Deakin University. We obviously support both staff and students, both internally and externally. I'm the contact centre, you know, platform owner within the university, but I also work within the IT department and have a support team within the IT department. So very, very early days, back on the 26th of February, our Deputy Chief Digital Officer sent me an email saying, we're going to have a problem with a pandemic and we need to start looking at our business continuity plans. And that was very early days. At the time when we started to socialise that in the organisation, everyone thought I was a bit cuckoo. And we pulled the pin quite early on having face-to-face support for students. But that gave us some technical kind of opportunities. So if we didn't have a face-to-face drop-in support for our student customers, how would we actually get involved with them? How would we engage them? So we did a bit of a scramble to get web chat up and running quite quickly through obviously Genesis, which was really great. We also needed to support everyone in the university transitioning to working from home or studying from home. So that's like 60,000 students and about 10,000 staff. So it was a really big effort that my team was actually supporting. And we didn't have any extra staff to support the university. We had a doubling of demand of our service with no extra headcount. So the university had kind of tightened the belt, so to speak, and said no more recruitment. So we knew that we had to make some process changes and some tool changes that would actually support us through that journey, particularly because we're obviously transitioning the contact centre to work from home as well. The challenges that gave us were that we really needed one location to control all our workflow. We were very well placed because we already had Genesis Cloud, so cloud platform solutions, so we could seamlessly work from home. But one of our potential biggest challenges is that all our online interactions came through our ticketing system, which is ServiceNow. Which meant that staff would be having to look in two different places at once in their home and have conflicting priorities. So we actually did a development piece of work, all tools down, everybody focused on this 12 hours a day for a couple of weeks to get it across the line. So I'm very grateful for my staff in being so resilient and happy to roll up their sleeves. We got an integration between ServiceNow and Pure Cloud so that all our online tickets would actually queue and be prioritised. So the agent had no stress. All they had to do is look at whatever was in front of them and tackle it one at a time, which really meant that their transition to working from home was non-stressful at all. They didn't have conflicting demands on top of the fact that they might have kids or partners or, you know, whatever might be happening in that place. We could make the whole agent experience really simple, really transparent, and it just meant we didn't have any stress. So that was excellent.
And that's really important, right? Because I think, you know, I remember even at Genesis, one of the first emails that, you know, the head of Australia and New Zealand sent out to us from working from home was, you're going to feel stressed working from home because you've either got kids or pets or partners or family members running around the house. I think you probably saw my partner just wander through in the background. Note to self, maybe make it clearer when we're running a webinar. But, you know, I think, you know, one of the most important things was, you know, he came back to us and said, it's okay because we're all in this odd position. Speaking of which, and, you know, we need to be really flexible and just go with it. And I think that stress was a big factor from what we've heard. You know, Jess, that probably leads me on pretty clearly to you. You know, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and where you're from, but I know in your story, you didn't have that work from home option set up already before this. So for you, it was a really quick pivot, right?
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. Can you hear me okay?
Can totally hear you.
Fabulous. Well, what a time to be a leader, hey? Everyone, my name's Jess Ricks and I'm the head of the customer interactions team at Sunsuper. We're a national industry super fund with nearly 1.5 million members, and our primary focus is helping our members reach their retirement savings goals. And look, we didn't have work from home, so you know our story is a little bit different to some of my colleagues on the line, and trying to service members through the market volatility across different states initially, which then led us into a pandemic, was quite dramatic shift for us. You know, I entered the business at quite a pleasant time when everything was going really well, and I thought we're gonna nail our goals. And come the end of February, things dramatically shifted. But look, our primary driver was really to maintain our business continuity and to ensure our employees' health and safety was paramount. And we really couldn't have asked for more from Sunsuper because we are the front line of our business. There's no branches, there's no retail stores. Our contact centre is really the entrance for all of our members. So if we couldn't move to work from home, we essentially couldn't have operated. And look, I think for us, you know, that driver with one sole focus really allowed the whole enterprise to get behind and rally with us. So it took us 2 weeks to be able to bring work from home together, but 2 weeks felt like months. The amount of change we were able to deliver during that short time was extraordinary, and I suppose it goes to show you with one focus what you can achieve. I think some of the things that we realised though during all of this was that our people's resilience and want to make this work was probably beyond what we expected. You know, change after change that was delivered, and still today we're delivering more small changes to them. They really want to be a part of it, and they're really trying hard to help make those changes stick. And I think that the other thing, and I don't know about other areas, but we had so much support from all over the enterprise. We had executives, we had regional managers, we had BAs, to financial advisors coming and taking calls. And if all they could do was just to say, hi, you know, how can I help? That was enough to assure our members that we're really rallying behind them.
I think that's it. I think that's an interesting factor, and it's definitely been one of those common themes that has come through, you know, from yourselves and from others I know I've spoken to around the criticality of that individual resilience, but also how other parts of the organisation have gone, you know what, I'm going to help because I can recognise that this is not just one area that's getting affected, and particularly those in the front line have a very, you know, sudden and noticeable impact to the way that they have to operate. You know, again, Natalie, that probably is a great transition to yourself. I know that, you know, almost the opposite of Jess, you did have branches and you do have this distributed network that then you had to factor into your organisation. So I wonder if you'd mind introducing yourself and what you do, and talking a little bit about, you know, how you had to make that change.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sophie. So I'm Natalie Lane, Head of Contact Centre at Greater Bank. I think, as Sophie was saying, we changed to Genesis around about 18 months ago. And as part of that transition, we actually relocated our contact centre out of our head office. So essentially our disaster recovery site became the site that we now operated out of. So we needed to look at our BCP plans and come up with another plan. Where were we going to relocate to? Because now that disaster recovery site was no longer there, essentially. So we did a lot of work towards the end of last year. I was fortunate enough to have our workforce and systems specialists focus on that. And that involved a lot of work with the branch network and having a look at what facilities they had available should something like this happen, because essentially that then became our disaster recovery sites. So we did a lot of testing at the end of last year, and thank goodness we did that. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is to not set and forget BCP. It is a constant review process. So when this all unfolded, whilst it was really hectic in that very first week. It was working out, okay, people most at risk, we need to get out of the contact centre, work from home. We had our branch network transactions decline, but as they were declining, ours were increasing by over 50%. So for us, what we did is we made the decision to temporarily close some of our branches, make them into mini contact centres, and also we redeployed some of our team back to head office, and then we had the work from home. So we were already trialling some of the work from home. So again, it was those little things that we were trialling along the way that allowed us to make that transition. I wouldn't say easy. There was still some things that we needed to iron out, but it definitely played a big part in keeping that continuity going and little disruption to everyone.
Yeah, I think, both yourself and Jess, I know when I was talking to you earlier, both of you have talked about your heavy reliance on your resource management and workforce management, staff and the tools that you have, because they really came to the forefront during this time, right? Because you needed to be able to be as flexible and change people's arrangements almost at the drop of a hat, I think, initially, because I think, there was that weird time where we sort of knew it was coming, and then bang, all of a sudden it was sort of here and affecting us. I think, Jess, you talked about a really heavy reliance, at least initially, particularly for getting your training and online learning up and running to help your teams who are remote.
Yeah, that's right. I think we were partway through an induction period. So for everyone in the industry, you have your intakes throughout the year, and traditionally everything's done face to face. So I suppose we were running the risk of, what do we do with all the costs that you've put behind your recruitment? Do we stop? We're partway through, or do we continue? And we had to rally really quickly to say, no, we can do this. We can move it to a virtual environment. So I think, with the right mindset, we were really able to drive the change and shift in behaviour. But getting hardware was quite difficult. So being able to support our people with not just the capability to now facilitate virtually, but it was also, can we support you with the hardware? And a lot of nervousness around, can I do this from home without the support of a peer and the side-to-side capability? So that was really challenging. But what it's given to us now is a new way to induct people. And I suppose we're not bound by state borders anymore. We can recruit the best of the best, no matter where you are. And I think, as everyone will attest throughout this session, to be able to provide some flexibility, whilst right now we're working from home in a crisis, but to be able to recruit from anywhere, to induct from anywhere, provides a huge advantage to you as a company, but also to your people to want to join you.
think that's a really interesting point that you make around, this is going to change the way that you operate with certain factors, like maybe your onboarding, recruitment and learning and development moving forward. And it's in some ways, while being very challenging, probably opened up a whole new range or a lot of flexibility for you in making sure you get the right resources. But it's really interesting because I think BCP's come up a couple of times now, and Hayley, coming back to you, I know you had sort of said to me earlier that your BCP had been written before you had the technology platform that you've got today. So how did an older BCP, or one that wasn't written with your current state in mind, how did that affect your ability to move and actually do business through this time?
We actually had one written when we used to have an on-prem solution. So it was based on this whole idea that we would commandeer an area within the university and kick everyone else out and be essential workers. And obviously with Genesis Cloud, we actually didn't need to do that. And what our focus actually turned into being was, what equipment did our staff need to take home to make sure their home office mirrored as closely as possible the technology that they had on campus? Because obviously everyone was trying to purchase monitors and all these things couldn't be procured. So it was more about making sure everyone had multiple monitors that they could take home and all that sort of thing, and an environment that more or less matched that. We did have, at an organisational level, something in place so that you could come on site if you had internet that wasn't sufficient. And some of us had corporate mobile phones so that we can use data off the phones if our internet's not sufficient. But we probably had, really unique situations where a staff member calls us and says, my ISP's out. I can't do anything until it comes back, and that's not really something that we can do very much about. And obviously it's affecting everyone across the board. So there's a few things that you can easily plan for and have contingency plans. And there's other things that are just constantly evolving in a very unknown landscape. That is COVID-19.
That's true, and you're right. The equipment, it almost became this sort of black market of who could get keyboards or screens or, what could you find to take home. And I think it was something that a lot of organisations got a little bit taken by surprise with, because, coming back to your point, I think, again, conversations I've had with some of our customers and organisations more broadly has been that BCP has predominantly been focused on what happens if you have an emergency where you can still be on site or you can be on your emergency site. So it is about kicking everyone else out, or it is about just moving to, another group location. But there weren't a huge amount of organisations that I've spoken to that said we really catered in that BCP originally for the idea that we might have to distribute our entire staff network to places that we hadn't anticipated, whether that's like yourself, Natalie, and those sort of almost mini centres in your branches, or even just completely being at home. And Natalie, I like that idea because we've sort of heard people go, have to push out and go to home, or if they absolutely need to, under strict circumstances or with particular constraints, they could come back into a workplace. But, what did you find surprising, or what was different when you decided to make those branches the centres? What was different about how you did that? What triggered that as being a way to manage a new way of working?
Yeah, sure. So whilst the branch teams have got all of the product knowledge that's required, the part that we needed to train was the telephony system. So they hadn't used the system. So then it was a point of, okay, well, how do we train them in using Genesis? So we actually, again, our workforce and system specialist, together with our engagement team, worked on a really quick program, which we will use now into the future. So I guess that's the thing, is a lot of the things that we needed to implement really quickly will set us up well into the future for different training. So that was probably the biggest challenge, was just that that training, but also the communication channels. So, everyone, we had Zoom, we had Microsoft Teams, we had what other ones? We had Skype for Business. We also had chat within the Genesis system, and there was, all these different avenues. So we had to move really quickly to say, okay, everyone, we are just going to use this channel for our communication. So that was probably some of the feedback we were getting, is, where do we find this? We're going to all different directions. Where can we find this information? So, it was probably a couple of weeks into it, and it was, we worked out that, your phone, your mobile would ring, your desk phone would ring, then an email would come through, then a chat, and and if you didn't answer it straight away, they'd try something else. So we sort of, that was a pretty big challenge for us, was that communication piece. But all in all, the training for the branch teams, it's we've still got the teams working for us now, and the feedback from our branch colleagues is they were amazed at what happens in contact centre. I think it's been a big eye opener for everyone, which that's probably been a really big piece for us as well, is just that collaboration. And again, we will continue with that. We will continue to rotate teams in and out of contact centre into the future.
And Jess, I know you had some sudden changes as well. I mean, you were saying, I think, that your wait times, coming back to Natalie's comment about, you've got an email, you've got a chat, you've got this phone ringing, you've got that phone ringing. For your contact centre staff, you were finding that it was going from, very either no wait time in your queues or very minimal to, I think you said, over an hour at least initially, which would have been completely a new ground for your contact centre staff, right?
Yeah, thank you, Sophie. And it really was. I think we had to have plan A, B, C, D, and so on, ready to enact. It was quite an interesting space to be in. But I think what we learnt is there was a lot of acceptance to try, test, fail, move on, implement what worked, and get going. And we relied, probably, as you said earlier, Sophie, a lot on our resource management team. There can often be some friction between, the people that do the numbers and look at the efficiencies, and those that really focus in on the customer satisfaction and the people side of things. And we had to join forces to be able to survive. Our primary focus was making sure we could be there for members, and for many of our members, as all of us here sit today, were really vulnerable and still are. The amount of impacts that they've had to their life, we really needed to be able to have the time to show the empathy, to connect, and to add value in those interactions. So we couldn't just rush people off the phone. So the wait times increased just due to that. And then, being able to look at other channels that we're also seeing traffic come through. So we still have an email channel that was heavily impacted during the early stages of COVID. So, we had to keep trying and testing different things and rely on resource management to say, do you know what, this is not working, leave it to us. We will tell you, when to do this. And that broke down a few barriers between some of our leaders and the resource management team. But I suppose fast forward a few weeks now, our relationship is a lot stronger. It's not perfect, but it's a lot stronger, and there's a lot more trust that's been built with allowing people to do what they do well, and to be able to work together with what you're good at, and being okay to fail and try again has really improved our business, a few weeks down the track.
And I think that's an important point, right, around the fact that you know, if it does create new relationships, or it does change the dynamic of certain existing relationships, because, you know, different skills or different functions are more heavily relied on, or, you know, their strengths and core purpose comes to bear more than maybe they do, or more visibly maybe than they do in business as usual. And that's a story I've heard a couple of other times in different organisations. And I know, you know, we were talking, Hayley, even from a university or from a sector perspective, for a sector that you would think is very, I'll say youth focused or forward focused, but you were saying, you know, this digital ways of working wasn't the norm, despite what you might expect. So that also would have brought about, I guess, some tension or some challenges in the way that you had to sort of convince people maybe that this is the way we have to go.
Yes, and look, we have a lot of really, really intelligent, expert academics and teaching staff that are used to teaching face-to-face, and that's very much in the fabric of a student experience. It's being embedded in the environment. Not kind of this webinar scenario. So certainly everything that as a university we do has been challenged in this space. And at this stage, I can't see us returning to face-to-face teaching for the rest of the year. So we're really using this opportunity to revisit everything that we do. And we've moved to recovery mode now. So how are we going to change BAU? This is perhaps the best opportunity we'll ever get to revisit what it is that we do, how we do it, and do we go back to it just because? So we're looking at all the different services that we offer. Do they make sense in the, you know, the sort of short-term future? Do they make sense at all? Particularly, I'm sure you've heard in the media, the university sector has lost lots and lots of money. It's projected that we'll be losing 200 million in the next 12 months. So what do we actually bring back, and what do we say? Well, we don't have money for that right now, and we've proved that we don't need it working from home. So why turn that service back on or resume that service just because that's what we're used to? This is that really moment in time where we can reevaluate everything and maybe reintroduce things if we actually need them, but maybe use it as a kind of cost recovery exercise. But it's the perfect moment in time for that people change piece, I think.
I think you're right. And, you know, it definitely, when we look back at history, what we see is at times of crisis. So when you had the stock market crash back in, you know, the early part of the century, then you look at, you know, even the GFC a few years ago, what we see is that actually, in addition to obviously the terrible toll that it took on a lot of people throughout that period, it also spurred a huge amount of innovation because, you know, what do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention. And I think that's what we're seeing on a number of fronts. We saw a record number of patents actually come out and be accepted immediately after the GFC, more than has almost ever been seen. And it sort of tells you that people have had to, you know, when they've had to make change because they've had no choice, they've looked for better ways of doing it and what they might adopt permanently. But you made a really good point about the people side of things. And Natalie, I wanted to come back to you briefly because I know that the people side has been a big focus for you at your organisation, and particularly to understand, you know, what the factors are for burnout, or making sure. And I think, you know, when we were talking earlier, you talked about the fact that, you know, you needed to even just review your leave policy to make sure that it was supportive. And sometimes it was a bit counterintuitive, you know, because you'd sort of think people don't want to take leave or it makes no sense to, but actually, even if you can't leave your house, people almost need that downtime even more so while working from home or working in new ways. Can you expand a little bit about what you've found with your people and how this has maybe changed some of the human element, or what you've had to really consider when it comes to resilience?
Yeah, sure. So Obviously, some of the team also had some personal things going on as well. So for those people, all they wanted to do was help our customers. But at the same time, they had their own personal challenges, whether it be a husband losing his job or a wife or a partner. That part was quite challenging. What we did was we reviewed our leave policy. So instead of having saying that, that we needed to take a week block of leave, it was, okay, what can we do to minimise the burnout? Because, it was pretty, it was call after call, email, chat, everything. And the other part to that was also that with the team working from home, it was really important to say to those guys, if you're not well, just because you're working at home doesn't mean that you can't take a day off. So treat it as if you're in the workplace. And with our leave policy, what we actually did, instead of that block of leave, we said, okay, over the next 5 weeks, you might want to change that up and just take a day each week just to get some, just to recharge. You might want to take a couple of hours each day. So with the help of sort of that resource management, and because we have that additional resource from the branch network as well, we were able to move that. And as a result, we've had quite a few just those 1 day leaves where people go, yep, I need time out. Okay, let's do it. And the sick leave, we've actually had less sick leave than we've ever had. And I think it's because people are actually putting their hand up saying, yep, I'll take my 1 day leave for the next 5 weeks. I'll recharge. So that was really, I guess, a good step for us. And, we just didn't restrict it to those, 1 week blocks, or we were a bit more lenient with it, and the notice periods and all that sort of thing. Everyone has a notice period. Your rosters are in place, so we can't do that. But, we were really quite agile in that approach as well. If someone called us the day before and said, I just need time out, then we made it happen.
I think it makes a difference too. It's one thing to have that passive policy to sort of say the policy's there, so follow it. We've now updated it to say, you can have all day a week, or it doesn't have to be in a 5 day block minimum. But it's another thing to have that really active encouragement from your management team, because I think when you are, being told, please take this, we want you to, and that message that you just said around, even though you're at home, treat it as though you're at work. So if you need to take a day off, it's actually okay to say, tomorrow I can't work, I need that headspace. But I think the key point from what I hear from you is that it has to be top down. It has to be something that's a collaborative approach, across your HR and people management functions. But it definitely has to be an active message, right? It can't just be we've updated the policy, go and check. I know, Jess, you were saying you at Sunsuper made a conscious effort to retain things like one-on-ones and so forth, even though, everything was going crazy. That was still a priority, and the way that you communicated that was by making sure that it stayed in rosters and it stayed, something that you executed.
Yes. So look, when I think we were getting, and I'll speak for myself here, there was moments when things were really, what do we do here? And the one lever that we knew that we could pull was making sure that our people felt that we supported them and that we cared about their well-being. Without our people, we don't have a business. And this was the one point that I felt really strongly about and challenged our resource management on, was let's retain all of our one-on-one meetings. Let's retain all of our stand-ups, because as you said, Natalie, call after call after call, it's really tough. And, the most vulnerable of the nation have been reaching out to all of our businesses for support. So we needed to give our people a break. And because there wasn't much of a time to do that or a chance to do it, those were those moments. And a lot of my leaders changed the format of those stand-ups. They went from operational to just go grab a coffee, go walk, go get some fresh air, go do something that makes you smile. And that really made a difference. So, I think we forget that the people we deal with are people, and we had to remember that without them we couldn't have got through this, and we still can't. So, I think our people did appreciate it, and yes, service levels did suffer, but they were suffering anyway. So, being able to protect our people and make sure that they felt supported, it supported our leave, it supported our absenteeism, and I think that was probably one of the best things that we did.
And I think, my observation, even of my own colleagues, is that, people actually became, in some ways, more engaged in their work. It was, I think at a time of crisis, and I even think back locally here in Queensland to the time of the floods, there wasn't any, I remember at that point in the contact centre that I was working in at the time, it really felt like everyone just, it was, I've got no qualms with just getting in, rolling up my sleeves and getting this done. I'm not sitting around twiddling my thumbs or, taking advantage of anything. I didn't see a thing of that back then. And, I think in speaking to the three of you, you sort of all experienced the same thing, that, when it was time to change, or when things had to move quickly, you each saw that all of those teams just engaged, and, working from home or working from different environments, not only did that not decrease how people operated or what they put into their work, but in a lot of cases, almost increased, maybe at times, needing a little bit of a guardrail to bring it in, don't burn out. But I think, people really just pitched in. Hayley, I think, you found that from your team, right, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I complained on behalf of my team to executive at times, but literally no one in my team complained. They worked around the clock. They were so resilient. They just rolled with everything. And, in the early days, we had a lot of tension from our customers, and they really just, diffused the situation, rolled with the punches, and continued to focus on the level of quality customer service that we would expect when everything's ideal. And, we have a lot of things that help support them as well, like gamification and things like that, to really keep them engaged and stimulated. You give your staff things and they will repay it in spades when the chips are down. So that was really inspiring for me as well as a leader.
And Natalie, I know you had obviously very similar experience as well to that, with the way that people changed location, even just the type of role, going from a branch staff member to all of a sudden I'm on the phone, trying to help customers in a way I've never done before. But I think you were saying that they sort of, they got into the training and they just stepped up and did it.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. It was across the organisation. Everyone, the first thing was, how can we help the contact centre? So that was pretty amazing straight up. And then I guess we had a chat set up within the Genesis platform, within the Pure Cloud platform, and every morning we'd have a few people, different people's, just simply even saying good morning, or we would have a feel good Friday video happening, and all of that sort of thing just added to, whilst it was serious, we needed to try and just keep that morale going. Some of the guys would, even say, oh, we're missing the wallboards. How do we know how many people are in queue? And it was like, don't worry about it. It's just one call at a time. One call at a time. You know, wrap it up, move on. So it was just that I guess that camaraderie across the entire organisation, and you know, our whole, you know, even the I guess the leadership team within the contact centre. You know, I'll fly our flag second to none. But I think the management team across the whole organisation, we just had so much support, and they just backed us. They knew that we knew what we were doing, and they just let us go. But we had full support of everyone across the organisation, which was great.
It's fantastic. I think, you know, you don't expect people to put up a lot of barriers, but you never really know until sort of things do go crazy or that crisis hits, just how everyone, you know, whatever the intention behind it, how everyone will respond. And I think it's been pretty consistent that there has been a really positive response, both from the community. I know, Jess, you were saying, you know, even customers were accepting, you know, that there was going to be that long wait or a longer than usual wait, but also from our people to find that they stepped up. And while you might not have doubted it before, you actually saw it in action. And sometimes that's a very different thing. I know we're coming to time, so I might just run around the room one last time. I'd love to ask you, I know you've all touched on it in different ways. Jess, if I start with you, you've had a lot of learnings in terms of trying out new training, you know, working from home. What are the things that you think at this point you will take forward as Sunsuper, either as permanent changes to the way that you operate as a company, or at least semi-permanent? There will be, whether it looks exactly the same as today or not, is up for grabs, but you know now that there are going to be different ways that you approach certain factors.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. I think, look, it's been great for our internal brand. So, you know, being able to share the great work that we do as a business has been terrific. This has highlighted the difficult role that we play. So that's been great. So I want to continue to drive that message through the enterprise. Some of our partners that or partnerships we've created, want to continue to strengthen those. So, you know, we're now working so well with our web teams and our customer experience teams and our marketing teams, because, you know, together we're better, and, you know, our messaging is delivered better. Our experience is delivered better, and, you know, I can't thank our teams for that support over the last few weeks. I think the biggest thing is delivering small changes regularly. What we've been able to show is you don't need to spend a lot of money. We don't need to outsource a lot of the great work that we can do, because we've got some really talented people internally. And if we listen to our people more regularly, we can often deliver better things and stop the dumb things that we tend to do and do business with ourselves. So they're the things that I think we'll hold on to. I think the other is that we want to continue to make work from home sustainable and flexibility just part of how we do business, because in looking after our people, we get the 1%ers, we get the value from our people by showing that we care, and wherever you work best, that's where you should stay. And I think to continue to deliver for our members has been critical during all of this, to show that, you know, this is our chance to show that we could make some changes, and I don't think we'll get a second chance if we don't continue to show that what we learnt through this pandemic, we're going to do business better should we encounter something like this, you know, during the future.
That's great. I really love that message around, you know, listening to our people, because we know we can do things better. We can always do that, and I think it's a really positive message for such a difficult period for people. Natalie, what are you going to take with you at your organisation? What will you take as your learnings or your new ways of working from here?
Yeah, so a little bit similar as far as particularly the work from home. We observed that some people actually do work better from home for various reasons. So what we'll do is do a rotation, so not necessarily say, okay, this is our remote work from home team. We'll rotate and we'll do expressions of interest. I think that's really important, even just for testing the systems as well. Also, the other part was the cross-skilling of the team members. So whether that's in the contact centre, whether it's across the organisation, is to continue that cross-skilling component. So, and the only other thing is just challenging processes. You know, there's so many process improvements that we made that, you know, we probably would have sat back and gone, oh, that's probably a bit too hard. We'll put that on the to-do list. And the amount of things that we were able to change so quickly, that's had a huge impact. We'll continue to challenge those process improvements and efficiencies.
I love that. I remember years ago trying to look at remote working for one organisation, and we just got mired in process. You know, do we need an OH&S review of people's home? How often do we need to update certain things? And then when you look at something like this, where people go, you know what, I either can do it or I can't. And most people, I think you're right, you sort of find what are the things that we kind of put in our own way, you know, organisationally, and challenging process is a great way to go forward from this. Hayley, full circle. I started with you. I'm going to finish with you today. So what are you guys at Deakin going to take away? What are you going to take away for your team that you might either implement permanently or that will permanently change the way that you approach things post this pandemic?
I think working from home is something that's definitely shifted significantly across the whole organisation for us. As in, it's proven that people can successfully work from home. Certainly within the contact centre, we can see adherence, we can see everything from go to woe. So we've proven that now that that's something that is an option. As a division, we've already said moving forward, once we do transition back to work, if anyone has so much as a sniffle, you work from home that day. So that's been already embedded in some of the, you know, the university-wide processes. And I think definitely one of the things that we've seen is a really good spreading of culture outside of my team, more broadly in the division. So there's been a lot of buy-in from our infrastructure services management team to really help improve services and improve the experience for the teams that actually are on the front line. And I really hope that that's something that we'll hold on to and embed moving forward across everything that we do.
Well, thank you. And look, I want to thank you all for jumping on and being so open and sharing what has happened, what worked and what was surprising about what didn't. It's been a really challenging time for every organisation. And I think, as someone mentioned, you know, even at an individual level, all of our teams and colleagues have experienced it differently as well, with, you know, family members being impacted in different ways, and just even the whole concept of not working in my normal workplace makes a big change to how I mentally approach my work for the day. So I think, I know for me, I'm feeling very encouraged that there was so much, you know, such a big silver lining to what has been, you know, a pretty traumatic and at times tragic period for people. So thank you very much again for sharing your stories. It was really helpful for me. Hopefully everyone on the webinar also got a lot out. I saw several questions coming through. Fiona, I want to hand over to you if there are any final questions that have come up, and say thanks again.
Thanks, Sophie, and what a great session. The feedback that we're already receiving is it's been a very encouraging session, and it's great to hear that when you hear from real leaders who are really in the thick of it. I guess one of the questions that would happen is that very few of us have ever led remotely and led virtual teams. So I'd like to ask the panel, what is it you've had to change in your leadership style to lead a virtual team? Because I think going forward, we'll have some hybrid operations. Natalie's already alluded to that. Jess has said that she's surveyed her people and only some of them want to come back into the workplace, etc. So Hayley, can we start with you? What have you had to change about how you lead?
I think we were well placed with a lot of things. We already were spread across 5 different campuses, so we had staff dispersed. We already used a combination of things like persistent chat in Teams. Certainly one of the things that I did when I knew we were transitioning to working from home is every single time someone came and asked me a question face to face, I said to them, can you use one of the digital channels? Go back to your desk, use one of the digital channels, because in a few days' time when I'm not in front of you, I'd really like you to be prepared for that and not facing a daunting circumstance when you're out of reach. So sort of softly transitioning that. Probably one of the biggest challenges, but also the biggest opportunities was people were really looking to me to understand whether or not the pandemic was going to affect them personally, their family members. So really expanding outside of just, you know, your standard workplace issues and helping them through a really stressful journey across their entire life. Everything was uncertain and they were really looking towards me to help them through that as well.
Fantastic. Natalie, what about you?
Yeah, probably the biggest thing for me is just with the one-on-ones is probably changing that a little bit to make it more of a check-in rather than a performance-based one-on-one. And also the connection is not a phone call, is to make sure that you've got that video connection still happening, because I think that's really important from that connection point of view. And I've found that has worked with with my leadership team as well, with their direct reports. Just keeping that connection there, I think, is really important.
And Jessica, from your perspective?
I have learnt to use all of the one-on-ones to get out and get some fresh air. And that's not for me, that is for all of our people, because it's easy to say to move from your desk, but very few people do. So we've kind of set not a plan, but that when we can use a one-on-one to just call on our phone and get some fresh air. And geez, it makes you feel good. So, you know, practice what we preach. I think if we're asking our people to step away, make sure us as leaders look after ourselves, because without us, it's very difficult to run a business, and self-care is just as important no matter what level you're at.
Fantastic. One last question, because we've only got a couple of minutes to go, and we're going to talk a bit about technology. So right at the start, we talked about, you know, monitors were on the black market selling for massive amounts of money. I do paraphrase. But, you know, so getting hardware was really difficult. But there are other technical and technology challenges that we have, as we are having at AusContact at the moment. Our mail server is down for the last 3 days. So what other technical difficulties did you experience, and how did you work through that? Jess, maybe we could start with you.
Right. So from internet to not having everything in the cloud, that was the biggest challenge. And then hardware definitely was difficult. We used what we could from the office. That was really important. And then we asked people, what did they have? So that was part of our move to work from home, is what did you have? And if we could add to that, that was helpful. But look, we went through the whole I suppose, gamut of technical difficulties, not being able to log into systems, people not knowing how to self-serve and support themselves. So that was a real challenge.
So troubleshooting. Hayley, what about yourself, your teams? Did they have some troubleshooting challenges?
Not really. We're the IT department, so we were actually troubleshooting for everyone else. It was pretty seamless for us, I've got to say.
Love it. I love you've got the experts supporting themselves. So what about the rest of your guys in the field that your people were supporting? Was there any knowledge that they could pass on easily so there wasn't the volume coming into you?
I've got to say we made a few really good decisions early on. So we went and bought Zoom as a platform. Obviously there was a big flurry while everyone initially learnt how to use Zoom, but it's actually quite easy to use. So even though we had a short-term kind of flurry of activity, overall it's been quite seamless. So once we got through those initial teething problems, what I suppose was a challenge for my team is that we had the rate of digital change for our customers was massive in a really short window, and them just having to roll with the punches and keep rolling out new change, keep responding to environments that were constantly being enhanced. That was quite challenging for them.
Fantastic. Natalie, your challenges as well with
Yeah, I think,
technology.
yeah, probably other than the hardware scenario, one of the biggest things for us was that because we weren't the only ones that were moving to work from home across the organisation, all of a sudden everyone was needing to VPN in, and you know, at times some of our consultants that were coming on later in the day were unable to get on. So our IT team quickly recognised that, and so that was probably one of the biggest challenges that we hadn't really thought out. And I guess the other thing was for poor old IT was for them to actually prioritise who needed the assistance the most. Yeah, so they were probably the two main ones for us.
Thank you. Well, we're actually past the hour, and I have to say we have so many questions. We could probably be here until 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, but clearly we all have businesses to run. So with that, I would love to thank Jessica, Hayley and Natalie, and to our facilitator extraordinaire and the team from Genesis who brought this fabulous group of leaders together. Thank you so much for making today's session possible. So with that, Sophie, any closing comments from the facilitator extraordinaire?
Yeah, stop. Look, I just want to reiterate my thanks to, you know, Hayley, Jess and Natalie. I think it's really important at these times that we don't close, you know, our organisations to being able to share across our network. I think the ability to share is what makes us as an industry, and particularly in Australia and New Zealand, so strong. And so, you know, I really appreciate, again, you all being so open. And thank you. And if anyone does have any questions or wants to connect with our customers to have that chat further, please let us know. Really appreciate, Fiona, you having us, and the partnership we have with AusContact as well. So thank you to everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Anyone that's asked a question, will ensure that they get responded to. And with that, could I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. Yay. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Sophie.
Bye.
Thanks, Fiona. See you.